Correspondence Program for Harvard Alumni Entrepreneurs. Our session is driven by your questions, so please get them ready. HAE is a volunteer-managed, locally organized nonprofit connecting Harvard alumni, faculty, staff, and friends across the university and globally. HAE is all about connecting you to the resources and community that you need. We do that through our 14 chapters and our members-only mentoring network platform. Please sign up for HAE Connect at harvardae.org. Our guest today, he really needs no introduction. If you follow anything in tech over the last 8 to 10 years, he's been the editor at large for TechCrunch, where he wrote over 3,500 blog posts about tech giants and startups over 8 years, which focuses on product design, social networks, streaming music, blockchain, and early stage companies. He's led over 190 talks in 18 countries. He graduated from Stanford with a master's degree that he designed in cyber sociology. He's been ranked the #1 most cited technology journalist 2016 to 2020 by news aggregator TechMeme. He's now a principal investor and head of content at the venture capital fund SignalFire. He invests in early stage startups across verticals with a focus on social apps, visual communication, remote work, entertainment, and media, and text transformation of new sectors. Our guest also creates content for SignalFire, drawing on data insights from the fund's predictive recruiting engine Beacon, and invested advisor network of 75 top tech leaders. SignalFire is currently investing from its $200 million seed fund and $300 million breakout fund, and has backed startups like Uber, Grammarly, Row, Alchemy, and ClassDojo. Please join me in welcoming our special guest today, Josh Constine. Josh, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I'm just imagining your applause in the background. That was a very sweet introduction that you just gave me. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, so I'm Josh Constine, and I'm here to teach you as much as I possibly can about tech pitching, like pitching a startup, working with the media, understanding sort of the pathway between journalism and technology, and how you guys can use these skills to improve your own opportunities as entrepreneurs. And so I'm just going to jump right into it, and we'll get into a little bit of bio and that stuff in just a second. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here with you guys today. I went to Stanford, but I won't hold it against any of y'all. Really excited to get to show off what we got here. So let's jump right in with this presentation. Great, you guys seeing everything all right?
Yep, looks great.
So I'm Josh Constine, and I'm going to give you this intro to startup PR. And I'm just going to start with the most important thing. This is the thing I try to teach every single startup that I work with through our fund SignalFire, and also what I really wished everybody would send me in terms of a pitch format when I was at TechCrunch. This was based on years of working in the startup business. I wrote over 4,000 blog posts. I went to a dozen Y Combinator demo days, saw thousands of pitches, and this is the format that works the best. Problem, solution, evidence. So frequently I see pitches that jump in by just talking immediately about the solution, about what your product is or how you're changing the world. Oftentimes they'll jump in with just the team. You'll start with like an introduction. Yeah, hi, I'm this, and this is what I've done in the past, but it doesn't make any sense. I don't know why it's relevant to anybody just yet. But with this rubric, you're going to be able to pitch something. Everyone's going to understand what it is, no matter how little experience in that space they have. They're going to understand why you're important, why you're valuable to the world, and they're going to understand why you are the team to win here. So let's start off. First, it's the problem. What is the problem here? That is the pain point. This is what is the sort of creates the emotional resonance for your pitch. So you can imagine that most people aren't going to necessarily know exactly what the problem is for every given startup, and they might not be the target customer themselves, whether they're a reporter or an investor. But this kind of pitch format is also really important when you're doing sales pitches, as well as candidate and job hiring, and trying to lure people into joining your company. So what I always recommend is start with the problem. Avoid all the buzzwords, avoid all the tech jargon. Imagine you're explaining it to somebody like they're 10 years old. You want to just make it as painfully obvious what's wrong with the world. And so, frequently you want to talk about either a pain point that's really big for a small group of people who'd be willing to pay a bunch of money to fix that problem, or you want it to be a relatively small problem that a huge audience has, and that you could potentially monetize through microtransactions or ad views or data or some other stream. And you want to make it as clear to people as possible that there's something really truly wrong with the world, that it's preventing them from succeeding in their business, finding fulfillment and happiness in their personal life, or it's just like an answer to a big hole or a gap in their life. And so I think one of the best opportunities for this that I've seen is talking about how was Uber. Uber's problem statement was so clear, it was so obvious that there needed to be something else in the world that they hardly even had to explain what the solution is. You just sort of understood what you needed once they told the problem. They were like, hey, listen, normal cabs, you call them on the phone, you don't know how to get in touch with them, you don't know when they're going to show up. If they show up, you don't know if they're going to leave you or not. You don't know if there's any like reputation or accountability for the driver. You're not sure if they're taking the right route to get you where you're trying to go. Then you finally get there, you got to fiddle with paying in cash, or they get angry when you ask to use a credit card. You have to calculate the tip. It's just a really painful experience throughout. So the second part of a great pitch is the solution. This is where you talk about what you do to fix the world. You want this to be an exponential innovation. That is a major change to what exists already. You don't want to be a linear innovation or just sort of a tiny step up from what already exists. And that's because network effect will prevent people from switching from a decent solution to a slightly better one. They really need to see a massive step up in value, or they're not going to go through that rip and replace process of switching to whatever your solution is. So again, you want to talk about this, very, very concisely and clearly. You don't want to use a bunch of tech jargon. If you're a more engineering focused startup or developer platform, something like that, still try to avoid a lot of those buzzwords and just tell people what the end value is. It doesn't matter as much exactly how it happens. Tell them what they get out of something. That's what the real solution means. And it doesn't always have to be a solution that's fit for everybody at once. Sometimes you can start with a smaller audience, make sure those people love you, and then you'll learn from them. You'll be able to gather the feedback necessary to expand your market, grow to encompass a wider range of customers, and that'll become much more successful for you than trying to boil the ocean or make something that's perfect for everybody at first. And you can look at Facebook for this. When Facebook started, it wasn't trying to be your messaging app, a marketing channel for businesses. It wasn't trying to do all intense photo sharing. It wasn't running events. It didn't have all these side businesses that it operates now. It was just trying to be these online profiles with your real identity. That was its exponential innovation on top of what had come before, like MySpace. Instead of it being just another digital identity, it was a recreation of your real identity and your real social graph. And that was the exponential innovation. And they just started by making it for specific college kids, especially at elite universities. And sometimes by making the product only for a certain group of people, you can use exclusivity to draw more people to a product. And so in this case, they did this incredible prestige laddering where Facebook really started at the very top. Harvard, Stanford, you guys know the story. It's like the people that the rest of the world actually wants to be, right? And so that meant that every other college that got it, they said, oh, I want to be like those Ivy League schools. Then eventually it was, oh, all high school kids, they want to be cool like college kids, right? So they want to join. And there was international students around the world. They want to be cool like American kids. And so they wanted to join. And then finally it was like, oh, well, if all the students and the young people around the world are on this, everybody wants to be on it. And they use that prestige laddering, starting with a small group of people they serve with a great exponential solution, and they were able to build out from there. And then the third step of a great pitch is the evidence. This is the why you. There's so many startups in the world now. There's so many good teams in the world that you can't just have a great idea. You have to have the perfect execution for that. They say ideas are a dime a dozen. That is no joke. Of course, there are issues with copying, and you want to find defensibility in your startup. But even then, you're still going to find somebody who's able to figure out what you did and do it a similar way. And it's going to come down to, are you the team to do it? So in your evidence step, you want to talk about all the reasons why you're going to be the team to succeed, not just that this idea is going to be a success. And so that includes what your past experience is, what you did before this that might have given you the skills to work on this. Maybe you have PhDs on your team, or your founder already sold a company in the space. You want to talk about your traction, how many daily active users you have, or how big your network is. You can be a little bit cagey about revenue statistics and some of those business stats that you might not want to be held to in the future. You might not want somebody to say, well, you were at X dollars net last year, why are you not at 2X this year? But you can give absolute value, or like a relative value saying you grew a certain amount in a certain period of time, or you've expanded to this many new markets. You want to really make some kind of signal that you have first mover advantage or you're out in front of the pack. And then you want to talk about what the defensibility is. Maybe you have patents that are protecting your technology. Maybe you've built it in a way that it's really hard to get users to switch to something else. Or you've made this the cheapest solution, or you have a great way of distributing it through channel partnerships so nobody else can get your same kind of reach. And so through all of this, you're going to really make people believe that it doesn't matter if somebody else comes up with the same idea, you're going to be the one to win. And this type of pitch rubric flexes no matter how long the pitch you're giving is. It could be 30 seconds and you're literally going to give one sentence for each of these, or it could be a 2-minute, actual sort of elevator pitch, or a 5-minute chat with a journalist or an investor at a conference, or it could flex up to a 30 or 60-minute meeting with investors. You're obviously going to go a lot deeper into a lot more stuff in a longer meeting, but still at the bottom of it, you want to first make people believe there's a problem, make them emotionally aligned with what your customers feel with that pain point. You want to explain to them that you have this game-changing solution that's way bigger and exponentially different than everything else, and that you're the team to win. Great. So let's keep moving. Everyone talks about wanting to do press. Press is great because in one sense, it is free and it can help you with a lot of different parts of your business. But at the same time, it is risky. And there are 3 big reasons. One, it can be a distraction to founders. It does take time to work on your pitch, figure out those reporters, do those interviews, follow up with everybody. It takes time. And so you don't want to, if you're still building your core product, you probably don't want to worry about press just yet. It can expose your secrets. It can give away that secret sauce, which is going to help your competitors catch up to you more quickly. And you might not want to give that stuff away until you're ready to really accept all of those new customers or capitalize on those leads, or you've grown far enough that you think it's going to take competitors too long to catch up to you. And then it's the too early to grow. This can come in a few different ways. First of all, maybe your app just doesn't have the sort of engineering structural integrity yet to embrace a bunch of new users or leads. You might just have too many bugs that aren't ready, so it's not ready for prime time. It could be that you just don't have the onboarding or the staff ready to be able to onboard all those new leads. If you're trying to generate a bunch of sales leads with a big article in like a business press publication, but then you don't have anybody to actually service those new customers coming in, you're going to waste that opportunity and leave a sour taste in their mouth as your first impression. Or it could just be that you're trying to reach users through the press that are all geographically disparate. And you want to have clustered users who can all sort of form their own little network and network effects. Google Plus is a great example of this. We talked about the Facebook story of using this prestige ladder and growing bit by bit through the right audiences. So every group wanted to join. With Google Plus, they just instead seeded this Google social network to early adopters around the world and sort of friends of Google employees. And it ended up being that all these users weren't connected to each other. And a social network with no connections is worthless. And so people would try it. They wouldn't find anybody else on it. It felt like a ghost town, and they would leave. And by the time their friends joined, they were already gone. And so it just felt like a ghost town for every subsequent stage of users, and it never took off. And so those are some of the reasons why press is risky. But there are some really amazing things that you can get out of press. And that includes, number one is recruiting. That might be counterintuitive, but being able to have this third-party proof point out in the market, something that people can read when they're considering whether they want to care about your company, an article that can talk about why you're a rocket ship and that your equity is going to be worth a lot, or that you have really interesting business challenges or engineering challenges that are going to look great on a resume later. It can really boost your inbound recruiting and your conversion rate on closing new employees. It can also very much help with fundraising. Let's be real. There is definitely a herd mentality amongst investors. When they hear that something is hot and buzzy, they definitely will suddenly rush to it, and you'll get a bunch of inbound interest because they don't want to be left with that FOMO of somebody else getting to do that round. And you can really juice your partnerships because you have this third-party proof point. Suddenly, a big company that's trying to rely on your technology doesn't have to worry about, are you going to disappear overnight, or does anybody really believe in this thing? Because you have this external validation from the press, and that can be really great. What you don't necessarily get from press, which is very different than a lot of people assume, and what it was maybe 10 or 15 years ago, is you don't get that explosive server melting growth anymore. And that's because there are just so many startups, So many publications, so many stories, and people just have so many apps already. It's like, the net average, I think, is that users are deleting apps rather than installing new ones right now because they just feel overloaded. And so it's very different than 15 years ago when there was this sort of class of early adopters that really wanted to try new tech products. They weren't overwhelmed yet. There was only a few big tech launches or funding rounds a week, and it was really easy to get a ton of attention and get that explosive viral user growth. Instead, you want to rely on your product to deliver that kind of growth. You want viral hooks and mechanisms inside your app where people can share a sort of especially interesting moment from their app experience, or that the product naturally gets better when you bring more people on, or there's some kind of referral incentive for recruiting new users. That's how you want to focus on growth, not through press, because press is very spiky. You'll get a quick boost of growth. It won't be that big, but it'll also fade away rather quickly. You need sustainable growth that comes from building virality directly into products. So let's just step back for a second. Why should you believe any of this? I gave you the problem that, it can be really tough to do PR and there's a lot of risk to it. I gave you the solution, what you can gain from it. So why me? Why the hell am I telling you all this stuff? Well, I'm Josh Constine. I was a pro blogger for 10 years, wrote 4,000 blog posts. I was the world's most cited tech journalist from 2016 to 2020 and was leading early stage coverage for TechCrunch. And so I learned a lot about what works and what doesn't. And if you're interested in following up and getting more of this kind of insight from me, please check out my newsletter. I just put it into the chat, constine.substack.com. I teach new frameworks for understanding new market opportunities, where to find new startups, ideas for building startups and product ideas, requests for startups, new ideas that I think somebody else should go build. And it's been covered by the New York Times and 20 other news outlets. It's got over 5,000 subscribers, and I just started a year ago. So please check that out if you want more insights from me, or hit me up on Twitter. I'm easy to get to there. Also, on my newsletter, I always respond and reply to all my comments. So if you ever want to reach me, you can just reply to one of my newsletters and I'll get right back to you. All right, cool. So let's jump a little bit deeper into this. What you need to understand when you're talking about press is what is newsworthy. You need to make something that doesn't serve you, but serves the audience. I so often see entrepreneurs try to pitch things to the press because it felt important to them. They spent a year working on it. They think it's going to really move the needle in something of their business, but it's not interesting to the end audience. That is the end constituent of a reporter and a publication, is their audience. They're not here to do you a favor. Never pitch a reporter being like, it would be really great if you could give us, help us by writing about us. They are not here to help you. They are there to help their readers. And so you need to think about what you can do to service those readers. What makes it interesting to them? What's such a aha moment, or it's funny and entertaining, or feels so valuable that they're not only going to read it, but they're going to share it. You also need to make the publication look smart. That means often being the first to the story. So you need to decide which kind of publication do you want to speak with first, because you often are going to get the most press the first time you tell a story, whether that's a new funding round or the launch of your product in the first place. The first press is going to be easier to get than all the subsequent press. So make sure you're working with a publication that feels like it's going to look smart for writing about you early. And that's kind of the angle you want to use, is that they're going to miss out on this great story and everyone else is going to be covering it in a few months if they don't get to it now. And then you need to make sure that you're pitching the right reporter, because it doesn't matter if you pitched me the greatest, deep tech engineering startup in the world. That's not what I cover. I covered social networks. And so I wasn't going to be able to write about that. And most reporters are literally forbidden by their editors from writing about things that are outside of their expertise area. So you need to make sure you're pitching the right reporter by doing your homework ahead of time about who you're pitching and figuring out what they write about. And, by searching for things that are the similar topics or competitors of yours, and finding reporters that actually write about your vertical. And you need to work it on their schedule. So often I hear companies are like, we're launching on this date and this is when we want press. And the journalist is like, sounds like a great story, but I'm slammed until then, I can't do it. And they're just like, fine, we'll just put out the news ourselves. And that's a terrible idea. You should wait for the reporter to get the best story. It's much better to wait a few days than rush out a story which isn't going to get any distribution just from your own blog or something. So in terms of figuring out which publication, you should be thinking about who is their audience. Are you pitching to CIOs and top level decision makers? Then you might want a more business focused publication or something like the Wall Street Journal. Are you trying to drive recruiting or developer signups? Then you might want to be working with something like TechCrunch or Ars Technica, or a more technical focused, startup focused blog. Do you have lots of visuals? Then you're going to want to work with someone like TechCrunch or The Verge that has lots of visuals in their articles, versus someone like Reuters or the Wall Street Journal, who hardly include any imagery. You want to think about your paywalls. Like, don't end up getting stuck with your story stuck behind some really tall paywall like WSJ Pro. I've heard these horror stories where startups think they're getting their big launch story in the Wall Street Journal. Turns out it's in WSJ Pro, which isn't even just the normal paywall version of Wall Street Journal. It's like an extra paywall version, and nobody ever reads that story, and it's really rough on them. You also need, like I said, be thinking about the reporter. Is it the right beat? Do they have the right expertise? Are they reasonably critical? Because if they give just total puff piece articles that are really easy questions, they probably aren't well respected in their industry, and no one's going to care that they wrote about this. They're not going to believe what they say, even if they say your startup is good. Does the reporter have social media reach? Are they going to do additional promotion of their story beyond the article itself? Is there drive more organic conversation amongst key players in the industry? And are you building a long-term relationship? Do they feel like they're going to be in the industry for a while? Do they care about your space enough that you're going to be able to build this relationship and go back to them with your future news? As it's a lot easier once you already have a relationship. And if you want to find which publication or which reporter, the way I recommend doing this is there's two websites. One is TechMeme, which you're seeing on the screen right now. That's sort of the front page of the tech news internet. They use algorithms and human editors to decide which are the most important stories, who broke the biggest stories, and they put those on the front page of TechMeme. And you can use their search engine to find all the most important stories in tech and who wrote about them. So search your competitors, search your vertical, search keywords about your business in TechMeme, and you'll find lists of all the reporters who've written about similar topics. You can also do a very similar thing with Google News. Google the names of your competitors or verticals and see which reporters are writing about them. Make that reporter target list out of that. And if you have a little bit of money and you're willing to spend, PR can be very expensive to work with an agency. It can cost thousands of dollars a month. But for $100, you can actually download the list of the top 200 reporters in any news vertical, like social networks or enterprise software or e-commerce infrastructure, through this website called TechMeme's leaderboards. And then for just $100, you get this incredible list of all the top reporters in your industry. Makes it way easier to pitch. Great. And so now one of the most important things, this is probably the thing I get the most feedback that this was the most useful part of my whole presentation. So I hope you listen up here. This is how you make someone care about an entrepreneur themselves, like you. How do you make people care about your own story? And that's about finding your superhero origin story. This is typically a formative experience from either your youth or your previous work experience where you had something that gave you sort of a chip on your shoulder. It was something that was a frustration that was so deep that you really felt like you were going to have to spend your life solving it. Or maybe it was a positive moment. It was something that was so fortunate. You felt so blessed to have this happen to you that you really wanted to make sure other people got the same opportunity. And so you want to find this superhero origin story. And it's not like Batman's. Most people know the story of Batman, right? His parents were murdered by a mugger in Gotham City. And so he became a crime fighter so he could clean up that city and that same fate wouldn't befall any other kids. And you want to find your own similar story. And here's a few great examples. Jan Koum was the founder of WhatsApp, and he's probably my favorite superhero origin story of all. His family moved from the Ukraine to the United States when he was just a kid. And when he did that, they were sort of isolated from their family. They didn't have enough money to pay for long distance phone calls, and he felt super isolated. He didn't understand. If it was just data moving over a wire, why should it cost multiple dollars a minute just to stay in touch with the people he loved? So he went on to build WhatsApp, this free messaging tool that lets everybody around the world stay in touch with their families. And when he got bought by Facebook for $19 billion, he actually signed the acquisition papers on the steps of the welfare office where his family used to collect checks. That is a superhero origin story. When people heard that this was something he was building to solve his own pain point, they knew that he wasn't going to quit. And that was what led Sequoia and other investors to really get behind him, employ top talent to join him, and eventually users to really believe that this was going to be around forever. Another great example is Jack Dorsey. You might know him from Twitter, but his Square story, I think, is even more inspiring. His dad ran a pizza joint when he was a kid, and increasingly customers wanted to pay with a credit card swipe. But at the time, there was a high fixed fee on credit card swipes. It was fine to take one for buying a refrigerator, but it was very, very expensive for a merchant to take them for a small purchase like a slice of pizza. And so he had to decide, did he want to lose his profits or lose his customers? And Jack didn't understand, why shouldn't it be reasonable for even small merchants to take credit card transactions? And so he ended up building Square and the Square Reader, so any merchant could use credit card payments and just pay a percentage fee, which made it possible for even smaller, food trucks and craft merchants and things like that to accept credit card payments. And the third one, which I think is really amazing, is the founder Moawia El-Deeb, who was the founder of a startup called Tempo. They're kind of a home workout screen. It's kind of like Peloton for weightlifting. It's a little bit similar to startups like Tonal and Mirror. And what his story was that, his parents and family actually became homeless when he was a kid. And he went to the YMCA just seeking a place to spend time because he didn't want to be out on the streets. He was befriended and taken under the wing by a group of personal trainers at the YMCA who taught him weightlifting, taught him to be a personal trainer. And then he used that skill to earn enough money to pay for himself to go to Columbia University for computer science. And eventually he went on to build Tempo, this home weightlifting startup. So basically you can make personal training accessible to everybody everywhere. Instead of having to pay $150 a month, you get unlimited training sessions digitally that come with your subscription to Tempo. And so he felt how much personal training it changed his life for the better, and he wanted to make that accessible to everybody. So when you're thinking about your own superhero origin story, you should be thinking, is there some formative experience from my youth which really gave me that chip on my shoulder, or is there something from a past work experience? They don't always have to be from your childhood. Another great example is Dustin Moskovitz. He was one of the Facebook co-founders. And when he started with the company, it was just a few people, just Mark and Dustin and Chris and a few people in their bedroom starting the company. But as it grew bigger and bigger and bigger, he found that he was spending all of his time not working, but doing work about work. He was doing emails and doing these stand-up meetings, and he didn't understand why did he have to waste so much time just figuring out what was the status of people's projects? Had they actually worked on what they said they were going to work on? How close were they to completion? And so he ended up building this internal task management feature at Facebook that became super popular. Facebook runs all of its task management on it to this day. But he realized this was something that not just Facebook needed, the whole world needed it. Scientists, entrepreneurs, all forms of business people deserve this kind of work management software. And so he left and started the company called Asana, which just recently went public and has become a $1 billion company, taking that same pain point from Facebook and solving it for everybody. So you might find an experience where you solved something or there was a frustration in your previous work experience that now you want to go solve. And you never want to lie about this. Don't fabricate a story, but you can always sort of reframe something as being a little bit more important than maybe it was. Maybe you didn't realize that's why you were doing something your whole life, or that was why you were so interested in this topic, or you wanted to solve this problem, but you can go back and sort of reframe it as being a little bit more important than it was. I never knew that I was going to go into sort of writing about social networks and caring about that. But when I was a kid, I actually was really fascinated with sociology and would draw these sort of orbits of all of my friend groups and who was best friends with who and who was dating who. And I don't know why I did this, but in the end, I ended up studying social graph theory and writing about social graphs all the time. And when I go back and I think about my superhero origin story, I think of those moments of being like, wow, I was so interested in, how do people interact and trying to record and quantify these relationships. And that's why I care so much about the digital social networks. Great. So let's keep on moving. We talked about all of these pitch strategies, but it's so important to realize that not just you need to pitch. If you're the leader of a company, everybody in your company needs to be able to pitch, because you never know when the pitch is going to happen. It could be at a conference to a random investor. It could be in candidate interviews when you're talking to job prospects, trying to convince them to come on board, or you just meet somebody at a dinner party who's an excellent engineer and you want to get them on your team. It's like it's not always going to be the CEO who's there to give that pitch. It could be in customer support calls trying to get them to retain with the product, or client pitches trying to sign partnerships, or just some surprise elevator interaction. So you want to make sure that it's not just the CEO or the founder, but everybody in the company that knows how to do these kind of pitches. So with that, I want to move into some question and answer period. But first, I just want to remind you guys all that the most important thing about any pitch is having the most passion in the room. Nobody can be more excited about your startup than you are. And if they are, they probably don't believe that you're going to be the best founder for it, because you're going to need that kind of charisma to be able to convince people to throw away that pesky thing called a work-life balance to come work for your company, or take a bet on future equity instead of cash value right now, whether you're getting somebody to invest in your company and buy that equity and say this thing that is worth nothing now is going to be worth a lot one day. You know, you need to have that passion. You have to be excited. You can't feel like just because you've given the pitch 100 times that you're sick of it. I always think of Paul McCartney, you know, one of the Beatles. He's still touring to this day. And I swear, he plays Yesterday and all those classic Beatles songs like it's your first time hearing them, even though he's quite literally played them on stage thousands of times. It's because he knows that this is about your experience, not his. And so he's always bringing that passion. But you need to be realistic with your own team. When it comes to being internal, you have to be real and honest with your team, because otherwise you're going to burn them out and you're going to get them to believe things that aren't really true. And then when they don't come true, they're going to lose faith in you as a leader. And so you need to be real with people. You don't always have to be crushing it. And I want to stress that. So much about entrepreneurship and the hustle to become a better entrepreneur is about always crushing it, always succeeding, never admitting vulnerability, never admitting failure. And I don't think that that's healthy. It's not healthy for you and it's not healthy for your team, because if you're real with people, then when you come through a struggle and you come out the other end, they're going to galvanize as a team. It's going to bring people together on your team, and they're going to form a more cohesive unit, more of a family that's going to go through anything together. And you also just need to seek help yourself. If you're a founder, you should be in therapy. And you should be okay crying every once in a while. It is okay to cry as a founder. That is a big part of being an entrepreneur. You're going to wake up some days and you're going to have a bug or some a big hire is going to fall through, or somebody's going to leave the company. You're going to botch a product launch, or a new competitor gets some huge funding round. You're going to feel really down in the dumps, and you need to be able to tell yourself a story of passion and mission and purpose to pull yourself out of bed that day. But you also need to remember that that entrepreneurs so often judge themselves by relative value. They say, oh, I'm doing worse than I was doing yesterday, so I'm doing terribly. No. You need to think about the absolute value. If you've done better and better and better for weeks or months or years at a time, even just tiny increments, having a little bit of a fall is okay. You're still way above where you used to be. So zoom out and remember that this is a really long marathon of a battle, and you need to take care of yourself your whole way. Sleep, eat good food, get sunlight and exercise, spend time with friends occasionally. Don't just throw yourself headlong entirely into work, or you're going to burn out and you're never going to be able to run that marathon race. So I hope that if you continue to put these kind of pitch practices to work, you build out your products that grow themselves and have the most passion in the room, you're one day going to be pitching me at SignalFire or one of our other investors. So I want to tell you a little bit about SignalFire. So let me just pull this back up. So with SignalFire, we have a really interesting approach to funding entrepreneurs, and that's that typically a fund is just a bunch of money, and they're trying to figure out, which startups need this money, and we instead thought about what else beyond money do startups need. And the number one thing we found was recruiting was taking up, in some cases, up to 70% of founders' time. So with SignalFire, we started this technology called Beacon. And for years, this was like the biggest expense in the whole fund, even beyond headcount, was building this technology. And to this day, we're about a third data scientists and engineers, which is sort of unheard of amongst larger venture funds. And what this technology Beacon does that they've been building is it's able to query 500 billion data points to track all of the talent in the Western world. We're able to assign a skill rank and a poachability rank, a rank of how likely they are to leave their company, to almost all the tech talent in the Western world. So then when our companies ask us for help recruiting someone, we're not just saying, oh, here's our offline network that we already have that's rapidly atrophying and might be only based in the Bay Area. Instead, we're able to query, oh, here's the top 100 people with the exact skill set you're looking at for, that are the highest skill and that have they're the most likely to leave their company. They've been there for a while, they've experienced title stagnation, or people frequently leave that company more often than they have. And so we know that they're likely to want to join your company. And so we have that, plus we have a recruiting team that includes Tani Kranz, who wrote the famous culture handbook for Netflix. She was the chief talent officer for Netflix, and Mike Mangini, who was the executive recruiter for Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook. And they help our companies put the Beacon to use, along with our on-the-ground recruiting team who warms up leads for people. Another thing that Beacon does is it sees about 4% of US credit card transaction data. So we're able to understand macroeconomic shifts, how competitors are pricing products, and how our companies should be pricing and where they can potentially make more money, which can be really useful, especially for like e-commerce focused startups or anything that's that sells to consumers who are spending with credit cards. Then we built this advisor network. Typically a venture fund will have this cadre of advisors that they can sort of ask for favors for to help their companies. Instead, we went to all those people we would have asked favors from, and instead we just turned them into LPs in the fund. They make up about 1/3 of the cash that's in the fund. And because of that, they are incentivized to actually help our entrepreneurs because they share in the returns when those entrepreneurs succeed. And so it's a lot more sustainable of an advising model. And so we have about 75 advisors on the with the fund. Those include the Instagram founders, Slack CEO Stuart Butterfield, but also specialists like the head of pricing for Salesforce or the head of ads engineering for Facebook, who can really help with very specific use cases. And then we have our in-house expert program. So there's me, who runs our PR program. I work with our companies to go through all their messaging and their core pitching, figure out exactly how to refine their messages, how to write their pitches, how to target reporters, and put all of this stuff that we've talked about today into practice. We have also people like Elaine Zelby, who is from Slack on the go-to-market team. And so put that all together, 85% of our founders say we're their most valuable investor. We scored a 93 NPS last year, which I think is crazy. Most funds don't even measure their NPS. And the only thing crazier than that is this year we had an NPS of 96, constantly trying to iterate, just like the startups we fund, find new ways that we can help our founders. And we also run these weekly councils. So we run weekly council events where we bring in experts on freemium pricing strategies or recruiting funnels or influencer marketing strategies. And we teach our portfolio companies this. And so just another benefit of being part of the SignalFire family. Yeah, we'd love for you guys to get a chance to hear more about this and one day pitch us. But with that, I want to bring it back to Joseph and talk a little bit and take some Q&A from you and the team. So thanks so much for listening to the presentation, and excited to hear more of your questions.
Thank you so much, Josh. That was amazing. I mean, I really, the 2 times I've met you in person, you just delivered the keynote at a 500 conference, pre-money conference in 2018. And in March at the TechCrunch, you were just walking around the robotics conference, and I pitched you my idea. And within a few seconds, you're able to kind of unpack it and give recommendations. You are constantly getting hit with all kinds of pitches. How do you now, going from journalism to venture capital, how do you look at a pitch, and how do you just decide, okay, am I gonna go further into this?
It's really fascinating. I assume that there will be a lot of similarities between journalism and investing. And sure, at the core, you're trying to assess the future value of something based on limited current information. But there are very different things that you're looking for in the 2 different types of pitches. For when you're a journalist, you care about what is interesting, not necessarily what's always going to be the most valuable, but what is going to be a great story. And sometimes that can mean writing about something where I would frequently write stories where I'd say, this is a brilliant idea that Facebook and Snapchat are going to copy, or this is a good piece of technology, but this is the wrong way to use it. But that could still be an interesting story, or it could be something that's just culturally relevant, but is never going to have an opportunity to become a billion-dollar company. And when you look at the the return structure of big venture funds like we are, we're a $500 million fund right now. We have several funds in action, but we're investing out of our $500 million fund right now. That is a lot of money that you need to be able to return. And so you really have to look for giant scale startups. And so, when you're pitching press, it can be about why is this interesting today? But when you're pitching investors, you really need to tell that adjacent market story. And so frequently, that's something that I see people leave out of their pitch, is that they talk about what they can sort of address with their current product, but they don't talk about in 5 years, if everything goes right, what are the other businesses that are next door to this one that they're going to be able to expand into? Or, you're selling this product, but what what gateway to other spend are you? For instance, there's an app called Rippling, which is an HR and IT service. And so they help you sort of get your employees paid and, deal with all the HR and benefits and all of that stuff. But they're also this launcher for enterprise apps. They act as like your single sign-on, the way that like you can sign into all of Google's services with just your Google account. They do that where you can sign into all your enterprise services. But because they're that launcher for enterprise services, they are this massive gateway to all your enterprise spend. And so they have opportunities as they grow over time to, make recommendations about those services, make paid recommendations, for instance, have sponsored placement, or have referral deals where they get a cut when they refer somebody to use, OneSignal for push notifications, or Alchemy for their blockchain backend, or Stripe for their payments features. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity in thinking about what is your adjacent market and selling that really long-term vision. Because most investors, they don't want to see something that's going to top out at $100 million, $400 million exit. They want things that are going to be able to get up to the billions. And that means showing a really massive total addressable market, and thinking about what unlocks once you're successful. What data or accruing advantage are you going to get from your existing business to be able to grow a new business later?
Great. It's awesome to hear your side of the story, because as founders, we're almost like triangulating many different incentives and figuring out, the journalist, the venture capital side. So love really hearing your side. We're going to take a question from Tamer. He's working on a social enterprise. Tamer, feel free to ask your question live.
Hello, Josh. It's a pleasure to listen to you. I met with Will Knight from MIT Tech Review, and he is now the senior writer at Wired. Cool. At one of AI healthcare conferences, and he was like you, very connected. He knew everybody. He was able to give immediate advice on whom to connect, and it was just great. He said you can connect with someone at DeepMind. So you're probably very connected. And so my question will be about my own venture, but I can say I'm a good chess coach for children. I'm also one of the co-presidents of MIT's Entrepreneurship Club, and there's a hype around chess in schools right now that some countries want to move toward compulsory chess lessons. And Poland has moved to compulsory chess lessons in 2017. And now I'm a leading chess coach, so I'm giving a few letters from continental chess bodies like African Chess Confederation to scale their projects in Africa. I'm supposed to make fundraise for the social impact project and also build the app. And it can grow with like a Minecraft or like Duolingo for kids idea. But you just gave a list of, for example, a list of contacts we can reach out for reporters from TechMeme. Maybe there's a list of social impact funds. You can also, I mean, you're connected. I'm looking for leads that I can follow up later on this one. Another idea is that we want to run a strong Kickstarter, right? So Kickstarter is one of the preferred ways of funding your tech product. And many times when you initiate the Kickstarter, I have doubts with which agency I should collaborate. I mean, let's say you have a great idea, still the execution is very important. And you have the success stories like Code.org raising $3 million in the first 3 months of their Indiegogo campaign. And then you see other success stories like this. There's a new Tilt 5 startup that raised $1.7 million on their virtual reality board game startup. They also raised on Kickstarter. They raised $7.5 million. They had just VC funding right now. And I'm curious how you should combine the Kickstarter campaign with this PR stories. Who should you work with? I mean, obviously you are one leading name. Maybe you're too busy, your schedule is busy. But for like normal entrepreneurs like us who can raise $1 million on a Kickstarter, I mean, we have a great idea. We have a good implementation partner, and how should we start?
Yep.
So in terms of, I'll start with a Kickstarter question. One thing I would be sure of is that you're only using agencies that sort of take a percentage of your donations, never ones that charge you like a strong upfront fee, because a lot of times if they do that, they're never going to actually deliver a great campaign, and they don't really care if you succeed or not. So make sure it's something where your incentives are aligned. Then you want to make sure that you've seen that they've worked on very successful campaigns specifically. Like make sure that it's not that just that they were somehow involved, like you want to know that they like absolutely led one of these major campaigns that were super successful for something that was very similar to you. Often I also find that the biggest part of the Kickstarter is honestly the video, and that sometimes you can get that video cheaper from someone who's not a Kickstarter dedicated agency. But as long as you have a great storyboard, you can tell them exactly what you want. Beyond Kickstarter, I also recommend Product Hunt as another great place to pitch or to launch. It gets lots and lots of viewers there, so that's another good way to do it. In terms of social impact funds, I don't have a list, and TechMeme I don't think sells lists of investors. They mostly focus on the startups the reporters. But if you search for a bunch of other social impact funds like Eric Schmidt's fund and other things like that into TechMeme, you'll find which reporters wrote about their investments, and that'll start to give you the right idea. And similarly, whatever, it doesn't matter what kind of fund you're looking to like reach, or whoever you're trying to reach. If you're trying using this method of just Googling competitors' names, the vertical that you're in, keywords related to you, using either Google News or TechMeme search, and then finding out which reporters actually wrote about those stories. That I think is the most valuable way to kind of reach figure out which of those people you want to be talking to. But yeah, I think overall with this, like you really want to make sure that you're doing as much prep work you can beforehand and learning as much as you can beforehand before you engage these agencies that can cost a lot of money for help with PR Kickstarter launches, and make sure that your incentives are aligned so they're never charging you up front.
That was great, Josh. One of the reasons we wanted to have you on this session is to kind of get your perspective on content creation for startups. So it's almost like content is the cost of entry for any startup now, because there's so much out there and you have to add value. So what would you advise the startup founders on this call on approaching our content strategy?
So it really depends on one of two things. If you already have like scaled distribution channels, you already have a huge email list or a big social network following, or you have like famous founders who already have a big following, you can do content that's more about just like the value of the content itself. And it doesn't need to necessarily be able to be like, it doesn't need to be completely focused on SEO. But if you don't have one of those distribution channels, you really need to be focused on SEO for your content. You want to make sure that you're appealing to the exact customer that would actually benefit from your product. Then you want to look at all of the major sort of terms or opportunities for content in your space, do a ton of Googling about all of the like keywords related to your space, and figure out what is valuable there. And what you're trying to find is effectively a popular search term that maps very closely to what your startup does and the people who would be able to use your service would be searching for. And then you want to build out the most robust content available. You want to be like a order of magnitude better than the other content if you want a chance at driving the kind of SEO results that'll help you get discovered through content. Because just creating content with no distribution mechanism is a huge waste of time. Because if it's just going to sit on your blog and you only have a few Twitter followers, you don't have an email list, and it's not actually designed for SEO, nobody is ever going to see that content. It can be a huge waste of your time. There are some like great SEO content firms that can help you with content. One is called Backlinks that can help you find get other publications or websites to write basically a recommendation or like write stories that'll link to yours that'll help boost your SEO. And there's things called Ahrefs, which is another agency that I've worked with, where they'll help set you up with sort of a bunch of tutorials about how to make SEO content, as well as these calculators where you can sort of stick in your content and it will tell you how likely it is to rank well for an SEO term. You can also use it to like get a competitive map of SEO terms related to your startup, and they'll give you scoring about like, this is how much traffic or how many searches we think there are for this keyword per month. This is how how high quality the existing top placed SEO items are. So what you're really trying to find is something where it's like, lots of searches that are closely mapped to your startup by people who would actually pay for your service, where the existing resources are very low quality, and so that you're going to be able to like vault ahead of them and become that #1 SEO term. Because honestly, if you're number like 4, it doesn't matter. Like number 4 gets like 0.1% of the traffic. the number one is going to get like 70% of the traffic. So you really need to win at SEO. You can't sort of come in second or third place. And so when I think about making content for entrepreneurs, make sure and for startups, make sure it's something that you're either able to have distributed or that's going to distribute itself through SEO. Otherwise, just focus on building a product that grows itself. I think it's honestly easier to build a product that grows itself than content that grows a product.
In terms of SEO optimized platforms, I know you're on Substack, but what do you recommend?
Oh, I don't recommend Substack for SEO. Their SEO is actually pretty terrible. I got linked to by the New York Times for a story, and I still show up like halfway down the page. Substack's SEO is quite poor. I would much more recommend like your self-hosted website, like a WordPress that's on your own website is going to do a lot better in terms of SEO. The good thing about things like Substack is it's a little bit easier to gain subscribers. People know when they see a Substack link, oh, this is what I'm going to be using. Like this is what it's for. I'm like going to get sort of thought leadership stuff from it. And so I think it can be valuable for if you're trying to grow an audience and you're willing to like consistently make content. But if you're going for SEO specifically, you want to be doing something self-hosted. And if you want to check out my Substack, you can check out what I've been writing and get a sense of that. Because what I will say though is if you're an individual, before you're a startup, if you're just an individual entrepreneur, content is one of the easiest ways to prove your expertise and grow your network. This is where what you want to do is basically become the known public expert in a niche topic that has these three categories. One, it's something that you're endlessly passionate about and that you're never going to want to stop writing about. Two, that's growing in importance, that it's something that's becoming more popular, not less popular. And it's something, three, that somebody somewhere makes money on. If you're able to find a content niche like this, you're going to become super, super successful in becoming an expert in the space. So, for me, I chose social networks at a time when there weren't reporters who cared about social networks. 10 years ago, there was no leading like social network reporters. And I sort of built that as my niche. But right now, I think things like autonomous retail, like, cashierless checkout, and that whole space could have a great reporter. Somebody who just focused on the podcast industry and like audio technology, I think could do really well. Somebody who just wrote about ISAs or income sharing agreements, which allow people to, sort of invest in a person and take a percentage of their future revenues, which a lot of education startups like Lambda School are using now. ISAs don't have like a great leading writer. And so if you become the top writer about a niche topic like this, you're going to find tons of people want you to talk to them. They're going to want to hear your advice about their startups. It's going to give you angel investing opportunities. And then if you start a startup in that space, people are going to say, oh, this person already has domain expertise, and you're already going to have kicked off that distribution and growing that audience so that you can drive people to that content.
Great. We're going to take a live question from Sam and then close off with a question about Twitter VC. So sure. Sam, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Josh. So I'm CEO of a bootstrap company. We're a startup, and until COVID hit, we were growing at about 15% per year on a bootstrap basis. We did a couple of accelerators in the last year or so, but it's a remote work application. And so since COVID, we've been growing a lot faster, probably about 15% per month at about $1 million run rate. And so the question is, like, we up till now, we haven't really felt like we were a fit for VC funding. We did some equity crowdfunding, some angel stuff, but who do you know out there that's sort of funding interesting deals that have cash flow and are viable businesses, but may not necessarily be a fit for traditional VC?
So if you're talking about like, you don't see this as having like, exit potential in the hundreds of millions, then you're not going to be a good fit for venture. The whole venture model is predicated on those massive returns and like missing with most of their investments, maybe making their money back on a few of them and really hitting a home run with a few of them. And if there's not that potential, they don't want to see a steady return business, because that's not how they make their money. When you sort of generate profits, they make money off of an exit. What you can consider are things like co-venture, which do debt financing. These are for companies that have a little bit more predictable revenue streams. Often when they have specific like assets on their books, or especially if you have consistent revenue, then things like co-venture and ClearBank can offer you effectively loans or debt financing, which are a lot more affordable than I think selling equity. And they don't come with the same kind of expectation of a massive venture return. And so that can be one option. I mean, if you're growing 15% per month and have a $1 million run rate and you're only raising a small amount of money, I think pre-seed funds and some early smaller seed funds would be interested in this. You know, Brianne Kimmel runs Work Life Ventures, which is a good sort of micro fund that's focused in this space. And you can search for, if you search for sort of seed stage startups on TechMeme in the like work from home space, you'll be able to find some people that are investing in those kind of things. There's also like a lot of pre-seed funds, like First Text is one that works with SignalFire, run by a guy named Corey Levy, who's brilliant. And they're really interested in sort of sub $5 million valuation startups. And that can be a great opportunity there, where because their funds are so much smaller, they don't need massive returns for them to be successful. So those can be a few options. So yeah, ClearBank and co-venture would be two I'd check out for debt financing.
Great, thanks for those. No, I was taking notes, so I think I got the list, but much appreciated. That's excellent.
Great, Josh.
Yeah,
we don't
sure.
want to go over the time. We have 1 minute left. What is your advice for startups to kind of navigate Twitter VC and slide into the DMs of the journalists and the VCs and even yourself? I know the best way probably to pitch you is on Twitter. So
yeah, Twitter is often a lot less congested than people's email inboxes. One good way is to sort of start by developing a relationship with someone sort of implicitly by following them, liking their tweets, replying to tweets with like useful information when you can. Don't jump in right away with a pitch. Then once they've seen your name in their mentions frequently enough, they'll be more likely to respond when you slide into their DMs. And always be like really upfront with, you know, access to information. Try to run through that problem, solution, and evidence as quickly as you can in like a paragraph or two. And in DM, include a link to like a DocSend deck if you have something like that, as it makes it a lot easier for people to get excited about it than from just a paragraph. Yes, but I think you should just be bold, like especially in DMs where it's not public. There's no real harm to throwing a few Hail Marys and just like making some reach attempts. So I strongly recommend that. So yeah, if you want to get in contact with me or just like, or shoot me a pitch of your own, feel free to follow my newsletter. It's in the chat, constine.substack.com, and just reply there. And you'll be able to basically email me directly from that. And that's the easiest way to get in touch with me. But yeah, otherwise, you know, I really hope you guys got a lot out of this, you know, problem, solution, evidence. Think about what the risks are of press before you jump into it. Remember that like recruiting and sort of partnerships and fundraising are the big opportunities from press, not just end user growth. Build a product that grows itself. Be the most passionate person in the room. And I hope one day I'll be getting to review your pitch here at SignalFire.
Thank you so much, Josh. Really appreciate it. And
yeah, if you need recruiting as a superpower, that's what our fund specialty is. And if you need PR help and comms, I'm your guy. So would love to see your guys' business. And I really wish you all the best of luck with everything. Please check it out. And please join that Substack so you can be part of our community and we can share ideas in the future. Thanks so much for all watching. I know it's you got lots to do as an entrepreneur. So really respect your time. So thank you.
No, thank you. We'll definitely have to have you back on. So many questions. I'm sorry to everyone that we couldn't get to your questions. Regina, any closing words?
Josh, I'm wondering if you're a native New Yorker.
I am from upstate New York, from Rochester.
Okay, there we have it. You speak like a New Yorker. Got to fill those spaces in with lots of content, which made this an incredibly exciting session.
Yeah, you're right. I just will not shut up. It's true. And yeah, if you guys want to continue the conversation with me, also feel free to shoot on Twitter or just tweet something about this session and tag me. I would love to hear it. That mean a lot to me.
Terrific. Well, you're just the best. Thanks, Josh.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys. Best of luck with your entrepreneurship. Farewell.